I'm going to talk about landscapes. I'm going to talk about urbanism. I'm going to talk about process. I'm going to talk about business and practice, which are two different things. I'm going to talk about impact a lot, and if you don't take away anything from this discussion except that we have had a lot of impact. Impact is what we are all about, is how can we maximize the amount of impact we have when we're engaged in a project. I'm going to give you an array of projects. It might look like a potpourri of disconnected stuff, and maybe it is. But it's connected by our intellects, and it's connected by the fact that we use those intellects to think hard about places and then to think again, because it's crucial to think. And you cannot think enough as a designer. It's important to draw, but it's even more important to know what you're drawing, why you're drawing it, and so on. Now, I started this, as Malcolm mentioned, I was in electrical engineering school for 2 years. So I got bored with that, and I didn't stay between the lines, and I didn't sit still, and I certainly didn't shut up. And you'll find that out. But today we have gone from just myself and my wife, starting a firm, to roughly 50 people. We're working right now in Boston on the design of public space, in New York City on a neighborhood plan for Brooklyn, in Washington, D.C. on an Institute for Peace on the Mall, in Charlotte on a new urban park in downtown, in Kansas City on a new performing arts center, in Omaha on a facility for the National Park Service, in Salt Lake City on a new civic center for the city, in the Rocky Mountains where we act as planners working on issues of growth. And if anybody wants to know about the impacts of growth, sprawl, and all those issues, I have plenty to say about it. But before we do, I'm going to talk about a topic that people don't talk about enough, the spectrums within a practice. If you can turn that, oh, perfect, thank you. The practice is not one thing. There is a spectrum of practice, in fact, many. And we as design professionals leave the schools and we go into practice and we think we're going to design things, but in fact, there are a myriad of different ways and places that we can activate and engage our knowledge. So I'll just want to plant some seeds. At the end of this show, I have a lot more detail, which I won't go into unless somebody's really interested. But I like to use this set of rubrics, that there's a mix of knowledge that we apply. There are ideas. We all have ideas, but I don't know how many of you know the name Grady Clay, but Grady was the owner and editor of Landscape Architecture magazine in the 60s and 70s, a great, great man who I admire and became friends with. And he told me once, about 20 years ago, that you have to remember that ideas are the rogue elephants of the mind. Did anybody know what a rogue elephant is? It's an elephant that goes crazy and charges all over the desert. And you know, they're really exciting, but if you're not careful, they might trample your whole village. And you have to learn how to train ideas and put them to use. And that takes expertise. Expertise is how we take our ideas and build them into knowledge. And with enough time, some people develop specialties. This mix is different in every person, and it's different in every firm. At Civitas, we're focused on ideas and expertise and not very much on specialties, hence the mix that you'll see. This is a pretty interesting kind of timeline to think about. Any given project starts with issues, and over there you deal with things like law, politics, the environment. You know, what should we do here? Should there be a park? Should there be a place? How do we stop this freeway? How do we stop growth? These are all ideas and issues, rather. We apply ideas to these things. We come up with concepts and programs. We try to give form through synthesis and refinement. We materialize our work. We have to deliver it and evaluate it. Each person in this room should ask themselves, where do I fit on this spectrum? Am I a person, do I live in the world of ideas? Do I live in the world of facts? Do I live in the world of delivery? Do I live in the world of analysis? And wherever your strength is today is likely to point you where you will end up. So you might think hard about that. We spend a lot of time debating this in-house. Where are our strengths, individually, as a firm, and as a profession of landscape architects and urban designers? We're organized to deliver something we call an idea-based practice. And we have a theory of practice. It's that practice and business are different things. The business supports the practice does the work. And I can be quite, we've got a lot of experience in this topic with a lot of mouths to feed, you have to be. But business is something we must do to make it possible for us to enjoy and deliver the impact of our practice. But practice is what we do for our passion and our belief in what landscape architecture can provide the world. We're organized very simply. I'm the director of design for landscape architecture. Dick Farley is the director of urban design. We have project directors who are people who lead every project, and then we have leaders, designers, and staff. Now, I also, if I were to talk business, and I'm not today, I also happen to be the CEO of a business organization, which is an entirely different hat that I wear. So here today, I'm a director of design. Civitas is a Latin word. It's the root word for city, the root of civics and all those other words that have that CIV in it. We're organized as a group of people, a politically organized group. We're not a leader and a bunch of people delivering the work. We are a very diverse group of individuals. And we are all and only about cities. We're about making urban places better. We value urbanism. You can read this stuff, but we think that the density and mix and livability and diversity that makes cities whole is our objective. So as landscape architects, we cannot just be about landscapes. We do value landscapes. We value compact cities. We value preserving land. We value having beautiful places. We value green. We value native. And you'll see these themes run through the work. We also value people. And in the firm, these are the values that we place on people. If you come to work for us, we want you to be politically savvy, independent. We want you to take risks, work hard, have a craft, and have a lot of courage. I'm going to go through projects, talk about some of what we've done. The more plannerly things are first. Right now we're in the midst of redeveloping 3 suburban shopping malls. I've got a pointer here. I'm that age where I can't see anything with the lights on, much less off. This is 100 acres. There's downtown Denver. This is the suburb of Lakewood, a pair of arterials. This is a shopping mall that failed in a middle suburb, not a lot of buying power. And we worked with a developer actually from New York to help them do the planning and buy this property. We are, initially I'm running through a number of projects quickly because I want to get into some meat later. We're developing a pair of focused streets. Important street here, an important street there. There are a series of parks, there are public spaces. We have been working on this for 5 years and now have over $10 million just in landscape construction underway on this property. And it's all about taking a suburb and making it a little better. I won't really bore you with it. We've got pretty pictures like everybody. This is an old amusement park, 26 acres in the middle of the city. You can see it's surrounded by existing development. Did this plan leading to this plan. In the urban design piece, we study very heavily the sizes of lots and blocks, what different products go on different sites. This is an old theater, which is under renovation, and so on and so forth. But our urban designers develop a lot of work in design guidelines. We guide architecture. There's several architects in the firm. We do very site-specific design guidelines to make these places meet their expectations. They get built. This is another strip shopping center which failed, which we are taking and turning into a mixed-use community. And I'm kind of just showing you that we're in this broader realm, and we have a variety of people who do these really lovely drawings in-house. It's very, very important to be three-dimensional. A very interesting project. This is downtown Memphis and the Mississippi River. We were hired here 3 years ago to figure out how could this river, which is immense, it's about a half-mile wide from here to there. This is the Wolf River Harbor through here, which is mostly, there are a few boats here, but it's mostly barges and things like that, some pleasure boats. Mud Island, many of you have probably seen the museum, in need of a lot of help. And downtown, which entirely turns its back on the river. The cobblestones, the last cobblestone landing on the Mississippi. Well, through a 2.5-year process of public involvement and trying to create vision, we have a plan. And the plan includes, which was adopted this June, by the way, by the City Council. The plan takes this high-speed arterial and stops it right here so that we can eliminate this roadway and bring the streets of downtown Memphis to the river. It also entails a huge landfill because this is a dead-end waterway. We're extending 80 acres of filled land out to Mud Island, removing the existing museum, creating an inland lake, which will become a neighborhood lake for infill development here, and creating a brand new marina on a redeveloped set of original cobblestones, and a brand new park, a new landing for the Mississippi Queen. If you know Memphis, this is Beale Street is just right here, the music scene in Memphis. And then creating this opportunity for roughly 8 million square feet of new infill development. As I said to the mayor the first time I came to Memphis, one thing I know for sure, we're not bringing the river closer to the city. So I think we're going to have to bring the city closer to the river. Now, these drawings are kind of interesting, but if you've been out there, you understand what it takes to take an entire leadership of a city like this and convince them that they should spend roughly $250 million just on landfill and infrastructure to bring their downtown to the resource they have, and that's the river. And this is going forward into schematic design of this element this fall. A very different kind of project. In Teton County, Wyoming, I got a call one morning. I was asked if I could be in the governor's office the next Thursday. I went there and found that the governor had just announced the auction of a school section. This is 640 acres of land for development. The school section is in the middle. My client owns all the red land, 8,500 acres in Teton County, Wyoming. These people have owned this land for over 70 years. They own the rights to virtually all of this property, and right in the middle of their holdings is this, and the governor was going to auction this. You can see the highway that goes up to the ski area, which is here. This is Teton Village. We were given the assignment of stopping this sale. And so what we did was formed a coalition of 11 different groups in Teton County. National Parks Conservation Association, the Chamber of Commerce, Teton Village Association, the Sierra Club, so on and so forth. And we built a public vision that instead of allowing this development here, what we should do is kill all the development here and move this development up to this red blob and expand the village. Now, this is what it looks like today, and if you've ever been there, you can see that virtually all the development in Teton Village is on the foothills. This is the ski area up in here. My client owns all the flat land. To make a long story short, what we've done is, here's the very first sketch. We did this sketch the second day that we were involved in the project. We postulated by getting these 11 groups together that there was, I hate golf courses, I'll be honest, but a golf course was critical to making Teton Village a year-round destination. More affordable housing was critical to making this a year-round destination. This property, the proposal that we recently got approved here has 42% of the new housing units are deed-restricted affordable housing. There's a need for about 50,000 square feet of additional commercial because there's only boutique resort commercial. So of the 50,000 that we have entitled, 20,000 must be local service, grocery-oriented retail. Without going into all of the sort of facts and figures, basically we did, you're looking at a plan here, the specifics aren't important. We're expanding a village, making it more mixed use, and so on and so forth. There were over 50 versions of this plan, and probably in excess of 20 public meetings that I led to build the entire community's belief that building here was more important than selling the school section, and so we have accomplished that. We have gotten the governor to retract that, and this development is entitled, and these, what we are, to show you how complex this is, the group of people that we put together, we're offering $11 million for a conservation easement on the school section, That's so the state gets initial cash. The school section today is worth $29.5 million. The other $18.5 million are coming in trade land. We're trading the state roughly this amount of land, which our owner will then develop, the state will own, and over time they will get their $18.5 million back. But because they'll own it, we've actually built an annuity investment for them. By owning urban development, the state has ongoing income, which they today don't get from the school section because it's fallow land. I know this is sort of complex and convoluted, but when you get out there, this is what you have to do. We design a lot in the urban environment. This is a street that we designed now about 10 years ago, very high quality materials and so on. Let me shift to landscape architecture. These start to get interesting. We were called by an artist, a guy named Larry Kirkland, who lives in Washington. And he just came by and he said, I'd like to meet you guys. Well, a week later, he said, you've been selected to fix this problem. And what it is there's a health club inside this building right here. And people were getting sick. There's 1,600 employees in these two high-rise buildings. People were getting sick. And it turned out that the chlorine vats for this empty pool were in the next room and were leaking. And so people were getting sick and they had to shut off all these water features and so on. So we were engaged with Larry to redesign this place, and we worked in this giant model form. The question was, what do you do for 1,600 people in a suburb who have nowhere to go? This is probably our most artsy project, and maybe some of you have seen it. But we got engaged with making custom objects and putting them into a kind of juxtaposition that gave a rhythm of movement, a lot of emphasis on how these spaces would be used, a lot of emphasis on how they would be detailed. In some ways, it's a very beautiful project. It's a very expensive project, as you might guess. We had several trips to Italy just to pick and get stone cut and so on and so forth. And in many ways, this represents part of our history that I hope to leave behind, because this is a project from the early 90s. It's very didactic and object-oriented, and though photographable, not something that I'm really that proud of. It's full of beautiful detail. But what I'm talking about here is, remember I said I'd talk about practice. It's the development of a person's thinking as you grow. Another one, kind of out of the same ilk, about the same period of time, a research headquarters for the Amgen Corporation, biggest biotech company in the world. We did a whole series of these highly patterned gardens. This is right after it was planted, native grasses and trees and so on. This is now gone, by the way. This is the only picture I have, because the client came back and built buildings there, and we've now made a new set. We are building a new set of courtyards. Very unusual client. Spent over $2 million building our work, made a corporate decision to tore it all down, built something else, and now we're working. They have 250 acres. We joke around the office, how many times will we do the same project? You know? We just completed a $60 million expansion for the Denver Botanic Garden to create a winter garden and children's garden complex here, as well as some major circulation improvements within the facility. In starting this project, I toured 11 botanic gardens around the country, including 2 in Europe, and found that botanic gardens are largely disconnected from populations today. They tend to be plant museums or flower museums or product places where people are focused on flowers and things like that. And in fact, they don't connect well with communities. And so what we're doing here is shifting the emphasis of this garden to the winter, because kids are in school in the winter. We can tie in the science programs then. And lots of beautiful drawings, but this will be underway next year. We have dealt with a number of very large facilities. I led all the community effort to build this new football stadium in Denver, did the zoning, all the neighborhood work, all the site planning and configuration, and it's been successful. Fortunately, the team is winning. Got to know John Elway. That wasn't all bad. He's a better football player than he is speaker, I'll tell you that. Lots of detail, great deal of community pride in this facility. Worked with an artist. Still, these things aren't that important to me. They're pleasant, but they don't have a kind of deep meaning. We keep learning. As you go through your career, you find you grow and grow, and you get less and less interested on things that don't have meaning to you. There are interesting things. For example, the fire marshal required us to exit this building in 15 minutes. And the fire marshal required that those people be able to cross this bridge in 15 minutes. This is over a river. So we did the calculations and found that this bridge had to be 32 feet wide to accommodate 24,000 people in this 15-minute period. It's kind of interesting. I bet most of you wouldn't realize that you can calculate panicked pedestrian flows just like you can calculate freeway traffic. In Clark County, Nevada, a new government center, an amphitheater for 3,000, an alley on the right of 400 Mondel pines that provides a shady spine for people to walk from building to building. There are now, this is actually this second building on the campus. There now is a building here, and the police headquarters anchors the end of this. It's all about heat and shade. In Jackson, Wyoming, a National Museum of Wildlife Art built on an old KOA campground. This is quite a spectacular environmental restoration project. Everything up to about this line, right? You see that color line right there. Everything below that was all revegetation. This site was completely denuded. Odd building. Now, from that, I just showed you about 15 years of experience. We started focusing very hard on what do we believe in? What makes a difference to us in our practice? And we came to these three principles. The answer is always in the problem, so we look deeply within the problem to answer the question we're being asked. We want to create places that are authentic, that resonate with people, place, and the economics of a situation. And the one that I made up, the last one, it's about them, it's not about us. We don't have a bag of style tricks. We are all about making places good for the people who will use them. I'll tell you a few stories which are a little more elaborate. This is downtown Denver. You can see downtown in this big oval, we built a park here. Now this park came about through a huge amount of personal effort on my part and from my staff. The mayor called me into his office one day and he said, "Tell me about this park of yours," because I had been out in public arguing for this park. He said, "You go out and tell me if there's an appetite for this park." He said, "You put wheels on it, you build the track, you build the engine, you put the engine on the track, you start the engine. When it's all ready, I'll get on and blow the whistle." And he said, "But don't put me in front of that train, politician or not." And we delivered this park. The first meeting I had was with the head of the downtown organization and Charlie Gates of Gates Rubber Corporation, Gates Battery and Tire, and so on. They told me this would never happen, that it was my own ego complex and that this park would never come true. I told them that this land, the Central Platte Valley, along this little crack of a river right here, was the best opportunity that our downtown had to bring new people to live downtown. Because what a downtown needs more than anything is pillows, eyeballs, and footsteps. People living, working, playing, walking every day, day in, day out. And we were bound and determined to make this park happen. You can see it here in the context. It sits right in here. There's our river, freeway, downtown. The question was, how could we extend the energy of this downtown to the river and make this a great place? We spent 2 years just sizing the park here in this diagram. This diagram, by the way, is 5 feet tall and 13 feet long, and it rolls up. And the mayor carried this from meeting to meeting over this 2 years. Here's my park, here's my park. Number one, excite the mayor. We developed this in 7 public workshops that involved as many as 30 people in each of 7 workshops with wide and diverse groups of people playing with, you can see these pastel drawings. These are just people from the neighborhood drawing pastels, playing with clay. What we're doing here is not designing the park per se. We are engaging the public in making this park so that it is theirs, so that when the time came for this to become real, the constituencies were there. Here it is. It's been built. Charlie told me, remember, that it was my ego that was making this happen. It was actually the community that made it happen. 4 years after that first meeting with him, he gave me a check for $8 million of his own money to help buy that land. And ultimately, we spent $26.8 million building this park. This happens to be something called the Sky Garden, where people do all sorts of interesting things. Our local newspaper dubbed this the best place for a pagan ritual. And there are always people there. You can see it's actually recessed, so if you lay down in this space, you can't see anything but the sky. There's a granite stair that's 460 feet long that separates the domestic landscape from the native. On the right, I'll show you more later, but on the right used to be a warehouse. We drilled computer tracked borings into the water table, 12 here and 12 in a native wetland about 20 miles downstream from here. And what we did with our plant ecologists, for a 3-year period, we took tapes of the water fluctuation, and then we looked for the relationship between groundwater fluctuation and plant community. We then did the grading plan for this site, built into different terraces, and planted it with the plant communities that associate with those groundwater tables, which we knew to exist here. And all of the native plants that are built on this project were built from collected seed or from cuttings from the native environment. So we all have the specific ecotype and genotype seed here on the correct soils, on the correct water table. It's unbelievable how this has thrived. You can see buildings in construction. These are some of the new buildings that have come since the park. All the buildings that you can see there were built since this park was built. This is that area. This used to be a warehouse. And we propagated all these trees from cuttings. We ourselves went out with the plant ecologists and collected all these. And some of them we actually grew in the office just for fun. There's a kind of an interesting thing developing. This is the 2nd year after this park was opened, and you can see a very healthy and diverse wetland beginning to emerge just as this new housing project is beginning to emerge. We have engaged, with the help of the local schools, 1,200 middle school students in the maintenance and management of the river corridor with a focus on this park, and it's now an ongoing site for science classes in the Denver public school system about ecological restoration. Here's an edge between the city and the native area that we've created. It's important to think about details, so every element of this park is carefully detailed. You can read the caption, but this is about a year old, but already roughly 1,500 units of housing have been built in this wasteland of a railroad district since the park was created. Every building in this picture is new since this park was created. We've got a number of new retail activities, as well as something in the neighborhood of 2,500 residents immediately adjacent to the park already. And you can sit in the middle of a city right downtown and have this experience of connection. Immediately adjacent, then, we did another park. The mayor actually hired us to do, I think, 5 parks along the river ultimately because we were so successful at the first one. This one is more of a neighborhood park. There are ball fields and so on. A great emphasis on connections of trails, bringing people back down to the river. I mentioned we have architects. There are 3 bridges in this photograph. Our firm designed all 3 bridges. The curve on the bridge was extremely controversial. It cost $400,000 more to curve 2 bridges. But by building community support and having the community participate in the design, it wasn't difficult to get those paid for. The Auraria campus in downtown is a project I've worked on for 18 years. This was a state highway, inbound, outbound. You can see downtown again. We did the master plan for the campus and said, these streets must be closed. This is what it looked like. Same place. Here's the inbound highway, outbound highway. About 30,000 cars per day came through here. Notice this little church, little Latino church right here. You'll see that again. What we did was we built a building on this site, and we left the front of it. We built it 16 feet from the highway, and we left the front of it gravel. And after the building opened, we invited the Joint Budget Committee of the legislature down. George Hoover is the architect of this building, and myself, and we stood there and we had breakfast on the gravel. and let the legislators watch 36,000 students try and cross 30,000 cars. It's no exaggeration. At the end of that breakfast, they gave us $27 million for campus improvements. One breakfast. A little bit of politicking. And this is what we did. We tore up the street, we removed it, we built a new highway around the campus. A large degree of that funding went to the highway replacement project. But we built a new highway, took this one out. Here's St. Cajetan's Church again. We built a campus space which has become tremendously active. We spent a lot of time working with students and to find that this innocuous looking little intersection right here was going to become the heart of campus, and indeed it did. Here you can see it looking back towards downtown in the other direction. This is where the highway used to be. This site has now become the center of protest in the city of Denver. Whenever there's somebody doesn't like something, this is where they go. When Wayne Allard and Tom Strickland want to argue with each other, this is where they come. These are our two guys running for Senate right now. It's also important to understand engineering. We did not move a single utility to remove this street. We worked with every utility provider, and we hired sub-consultants. We did a telecommunications master plan, fiber optics master plan, a gas master plan, water master plan, sanitary storm sewer master plans, to show how as the pipes, there's a 30-inch water line right under this sidewalk here. As those pipes age, rather than maintain them in place, we created a funding stream against a master plan to relocate them later, because the cost of moving the utilities to remove the highway was in excess of $5 million. We didn't have that. Here's a festival going on at that crossing point that I talked about. We worked with a number of artists. Another thing that we did, very simple. This is an REI store. I assume you know what REI is. And this is the old tramway maintenance facility for our tram system. It had been vacant for years. This is on the Platte River. I gathered together over 20 groups of river users, from the Sierra Club to the Platte River kayakers and so on, and posed the question, if REI is here, the river's just like right here, if REI is on this site, what will it take to win your support? And what we found was they didn't want to see the parking. So we built a vision with REI in this community, and for $6.5 million, buried the parking underground. Now, REI didn't have that money, so I took the leadership of my little coalition. We went to the mayor's office, we went to the Urban Renewal Authority, and we beat on them until we got the money to put this parking underground. I think this is the last thing I'm going to show you, because I was told that everybody goes away in an hour. A new project in Salt Lake City. This is a collaboration with Moshe Safdie, an architect from Boston. And what you're seeing here is the existing city hall, the existing library. These are very, very large blocks, 660 feet square. A new library building, which is a triangle, an administration building, which is a rectangle, and this spiral, which will surprise you when you see what it is. We've developed the entire site in two parts. First, we building this site, and then we got involved in a huge controversy over this piece of ground, the other 4.5 acres, where the community wanted affordable housing on this property. Affordable housing was a bad idea on this property. The real problem in this neighborhood, we learned in 7 public meetings, we did a neighborhood analysis of about a 30-block neighborhood, and we found that the zoning was a problem, that the economics were a problem, that transportation was a problem. And by doing a neighborhood plan, we came back and showed people that an open space was a better benefit to their neighborhood than affordable housing. The plan looks something like this. There is, again, here's the building as a reflecting pool. This is intended to be Salt Lake City's great civic plaza. Now, if you know Salt Lake, it's a community that has a lot of dialogue between people who are members of the LDS Church and people who are not. And most public spaces in downtown Salt Lake somehow end up becoming co-opted either by private interest, either by church interest or by property owner interest. There really isn't a truly public gathering space for events and festivals. So this space that I'll be showing you here has now been designated as the primary secular gathering space for Salt Lake. It will be the head of the Utah Arts Festival and a number of other, roughly 14 different major events through the course of a season. What we've got is a plaza which is made 100% out of stone, all of which is coming from Jerusalem, Israel. Beautiful, beautiful stone. A descending wedge, which is a patterned garden. You see this kind of diamond pattern. This garden is being taken over by Red Butte Botanic Garden and operated as their downtown botanic garden. A major water feature. And this entire wedge is descending into the ground. So there's a wall right here that's about 7 feet high, and this is low and that's high. That will make a little more sense later. Then expanding to a park on the east. Through all these public meetings and efforts with the different constituencies involved, we defined a series of 5 major event locations. For example, this can accommodate a temporary band shell and 2,500 people, and we can have readings for 165 people here and so on. A great deal of negotiation around this topic. And here you can see, I hope this reads, how this is the library behind, how this wedge rises out of the ground on one end and descends at the other end to this very, very large water feature. The water feature is 14 feet high and 80 feet long. Here you see it in 3 dimensions. This is all, this line right here represents the hinge point between the grade and what's rising and what's falling. There's a hole right here, actually right there, and it's the only place in this entire site that's not on structured parking. All of the rest of the site is above structure. And that's why we've tipped the ground down into the ground, because we're able to use real soil there. We'd have no loading problems because we have 1 million pounds of stone right here. The water wall itself is, has water gushing down this side, virtually dry here, this interesting splay fashion. Like I say, it's about 80 feet across. And it's under construction. I thought it would be interesting for students to see what it takes to put a project like this together. Here's the amphitheater. Remember I said 165 people located here. This is the children's library, which is underneath the reflecting pool with skylights. We've designed a pair of water walls, which there's continuous water running down so that kids can sit in the library and actually stick their hand through a sheet of water. Here's the hole in the ground that I talked about, and the beginning of formwork for the major fountain. You can see the tail of this giant wall, which is canted like this, and it's a spiral. It's absolutely fantastic. The entire bottom floor, this first floor, is all shops right on into the library space. And this level here is the mezzanine. And in a moment, if you remember this picture, I'll explain what happens on that mezzanine. This is what it's like being on top of this wall. So that was actually all under construction before we got to design the second half. So it's 2 parts. What we've got is, besides this grand promenade of shade trees as a place to sit, the lawn slopes up 18 feet. So you'll be able to walk from the sidewalk up the lawn into that mezzanine and look down on the plaza from the second level. The other lawn slopes the other direction, giving you a sense of enclosure for events in this location. Then this descends down, this is a high point, descends down under a bridge and into the plazas from behind. And just a couple of last images. This is what it's going to look like as you look from the edge of the park back towards the library through the crescent wall, and then from another view under that little bridge that I talked about. These, by the way, are theaters which are under construction. You can see people up on that grand wall. I have more that I could talk about, but I thought I would try and be quick because I really like questions and discussions. So I'm just going to end right there for now.